Previously on Extraordinary Peoples, we explored how legendary game designer Warren Spector combined his unique approach to gaming with Disney's most iconic character to create a beloved classic that would rise, fall, and ultimately rise again. Learn the fascinating story and relive the magic in the previous video, A Needlessly Exhaustive History of Epic Mickey.
Was one of the founders of Cyberpunk along with builders. But it was telling a story myself, being the storyteller. And so I've spent my professional career trying to give every player the feeling of being an author, of telling their story.
Still working on this Snow White video, huh?
Figment, you can't rush creativity. It takes time to do things right.
Well, you can't go this long without making anything.
Yeah, you're right. Say, Epic Mickey Rebrushed just came out. Let's make a video about that.
That's a great idea. We can tell everyone how we met Warren Spector.
Whoa, slow down, Figment. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. First, we should talk about everything we didn't talk about in the last video. Then we can talk about everything that's happened to Epic Mickey since then, including our trip to D23. Then we can talk about Rebrushed, which will be the biggest part of the video, probably. And finally, we can talk about where we want Epic Mickey to go in the future. And then we'll end with the conclusion that ties everything together. How's that sound for a video?
I think that sounds great.
Alright, let's do it.
Roll the title sequence. I've always wanted to see that.
Hello, Extraordinary People. I'm Daniel, or Dreamfinder. This is Figment.
Hello, everybody.
And today, we're going to continue the story that we started in my last video, and that is the story of my favorite video game of all time, Epic Mickey. If you haven't seen that video yet, it's linked in the description, and I would recommend you watch that first before you watch this one. Alright, let's begin. Part 1. Some stuff I didn't talk about in the last video. Despite my last video being titled, A Needlessly Exhaustive History of Epic Mickey, there were some things I didn't talk about. Most of them were things I simply didn't know about because I somehow missed them in my research process. Some were things I didn't think were important enough to make it in, or that I thought would disrupt the flow of the video, and some were things that weren't publicly known or available until very recently. So let's talk about those now. The Art of Epic Mickey book. This is a book that talks about the making of Epic Mickey and showcases artwork from the game, including concept art, a lot of which is not publicly available elsewhere. I really wanted to get this book for my last video, but it was way too expensive. But I have it now. There's way too much in here to cover in this video, but if you're able to get your hands on a copy for a reasonable price, I would highly recommend it. Epic Mickey Pitch Trailer. In January of this year, 2024, DeviantArt user Thomas Hyman shared a post containing an animated pitch trailer for Epic Mickey with the following caption. This was made for Junction Point Studios as an internal pitch for Disney to develop a video game. I directed the animation and personally animated all the shots from the beginning to when Mickey goes down the hole, then everything after he starts to fly. Thanks to my fellow animators Jesse Slate and Mike Boyce for their awesome contributions. Thanks to Animation Farm, RIP, and rigging guru Josh Carey and effects master Adam Gravoy. This trailer is very interesting to me for a lot of reasons. First, Mickey's design is very weird and stylized, and doesn't seem to match at least most of the concept art that I've seen for Epic Mickey. Mickey also has a gun, which is interesting. A lot of the concepts shown in the trailer, though, are actually very close to what would make it into the final game. The blotlings are essentially the same. Mickey uses ink instead of paint, but he does use it to create objects. One of those objects is an anvil, which of course is one of the sketches Mickey can use in the game. At one point in the trailer, Mickey is strapped to a mad scientist's table, with the mad scientist trying to remove something from him. This is almost exactly like the mad doctor trying to remove Mickey's heart. This was almost certainly inspired by the 1995 Mickey short Runaway Brain, in which Mickey finds himself in a very similar situation. Further evidence for this is the fact that Runaway Brain is referenced in Epic Mickey, so the creators were definitely aware of it. My biggest questions about this trailer though are when it was made and why it was made at all. I've seen people saying it's from 2006 or 2007, but that is unconfirmed because the post on DeviantArt does not say when the trailer was made. However, I do think that 2006 to 2007 date is likely, and here's why. At the end of the trailer, it says, coming 2008, and we know the trailer was made for Junction Point based on Thomas Hyman's caption and a Junction Point logo at the end of the trailer. Junction Point was officially bought by Disney in 2006, right after Disney reacquired the rights to Oswald Lucky Rabbit, and so if we assume that the trailer was made after that, then that would put it somewhere between 2006 and 2008. However, it's totally possible that the trailer was made before that, since Warren Spector was in talks with Disney to direct Epic Mickey as early as 2004. What's far less clear though than when this trailer was made is why. According to Thomas Hyman's caption on the original post, the trailer was, quote, made for Junction Point Studios as an internal pitch for Disney to develop a video game. But that makes no sense to me. The impression you get from this description is that Junction Point pitched Disney the idea of Epic Mickey, but the truth is the opposite. Disney pitched Junction Point Epic Mickey. Here's a clip of Warren Spector saying literally that.
The birth of the idea actually came from Disney itself. A lot of people think that I went to Disney and said, give me Mickey Mouse, and that's not the way it happened at all. I sat down with Disney talking about a fantasy game and a science fiction game I wanted to do, and they were not particularly interested in it, frankly. Instead, they asked me if I was interested in doing a Mickey Mouse game.
So what is going on with this trailer and why was it made? Well, obviously I don't know, but here's how I think it went down. I think this trailer was made in 2006, shortly after Junction Point was bought by Disney, and I think it was made to pitch Junction Point's specific vision for Epic Mickey at that point, and also to see what Disney would allow them to do with the game. This is evidenced by some pieces of concept art of Oswald and Mickey in the Art of Epic Mickey book that show them in its design early in development. I think Junction Point then hired outside animators to create the trailer, and because this was a project in very early development, they could only give the animators limited information about it, which led to those animators inferring that Junction Point was pitching a game to Disney and not what was actually happening. Based on the very scant available information, I think that is the best explanation of why this trailer exists, and why the caption on the original post says what it does. I have no way of confirming any of this though, and so I know this is never going to happen, but on the off chance that anyone who worked on Epic Mickey or was involved in making this trailer is watching this video right now, I would be thrilled if you could leave a comment and let me know if I'm right or wrong. Also, if anyone is interested in watching the entire Epic Mickey pitch trailer, I've linked it in the description, and the reason I didn't include it in the video is that I did not know about it. Epic Mickey Path Painter. Epic Mickey Path Painter is a Flash game that was available to download from Disney.com back when Epic Mickey first launched. It is still playable if you have Adobe Flash installed, but you have to download the game from an archive, and if you don't have Flash, you're out of luck, because Adobe discontinued that years ago. The game is also apparently dependent on Disney's servers, where it has not yet been fully deleted, but if it ever is, it may not be playable again. If you have a computer that still has Flash on it and are interested in playing this game, I've included an archive download link in the description. The game is essentially an extremely simplified version of Epic Mickey where you have to use paint and thinner to get through levels and defeat blotlings, except the blotlings can only be defeated with thinner, and not also redeemed with paint like in the actual game. I've also included a link to a video of a full playthrough of the game if you're interested. The reason I didn't include Path Painter in the last video was because I didn't know it existed, and as such, I've never played it. Epic Mickey Graphic Novel Physical Releases. In the last video, I talked about the Epic Mickey graphic novel, and I mentioned that it was not released physically in the US and was only released digitally. What I didn't mention was that it was released physically in several European countries, including in the Italian magazine Topolino, which also apparently published an Epic Mickey 2 graphic novel as well that was never available in the US in any format. Apparently, Epic Mickey is really big over there, which is awesome. The reason I didn't mention this in the video was that it was difficult to find any information about these graphic novel releases, and I eventually just decided it wasn't worth mentioning. However, I did get several comments about it, so I decided I should mention it here, and if I could go back and redo that video, I probably would mention it now. Epic Mickey Novelization. In addition to its graphic novel, Epic Mickey also got a physical novelization that was apparently released in the US and Canada. I was able to acquire a copy of this, and my copy was apparently printed in 2011. The novelization essentially follows the story of the game, but with a lot of minor changes and embellishments. The novelization is also pretty cheaply printed on rough paper with a few black and white images here and there, and some of the pages are noticeably fainter than the rest of the book, like the printing wasn't totally up to par. The middle of the book though does have some color illustrations on higher quality paper which appear to be a mix of concept art and images from the game. It's definitely an interesting read, especially because the idea of adapting a video game story into a novel is so strange and fascinating to me. I'm not sure if the novel is available to read online anywhere, but you can get relatively cheap copies from sites like Thrift Books, which is where I got mine. I didn't include this in the previous video because I didn't know they existed. Epic Donald gameplay footage. Epic Donald was a planned spin-off of Epic Mickey set in the DuckTales universe that I did talk about in my video, but what I didn't realize was that Epic Donald was actually way farther into development when it was cancelled than I thought. My understanding was that they had only made some concept art, digital renderings of some of the characters, and very little else, but they had actually gotten as far as making full character models and even some rough gameplay. I've included a link to where you can watch that if you're interested, and I didn't include it in the video because I didn't know it existed at the time. By the way, shout out to user Pleasant Gradient, who was the one to first share this footage. You should definitely check out his channel if you're interested in Epic Mickey, and especially anything behind the scenes or unreleased. Also, by the way, Epic Donald looked amazing, and I think it could possibly have been even better than Epic Mickey if it had actually gotten made and lived up to its full potential. Epic Mickey 2 short film. Apparently, a 3D animated short film featuring Mickey and Oswald was created during the production of Epic Mickey 2. Footage of this was just recently leaked on YouTube in September of this year, 2024, and I've included a link to that in the description. The footage is not the entire short, but only a few clips. The short is apparently called Unlucky Luchas, based on some music tracks shared by Epic Mickey composer James Dooley that appear in the clips. And the short features Mickey and Oswald attempting to train to become wrestlers and wrestle Big Bad Pete and the Big Bad Wolf. There's also some 2D footage from this short, which suggests that there were possibly two versions produced or considered, or maybe that the short features both 2D and 3D animation. There is no information available about where or when this short was ever planned to be released, but I would guess that this was probably either planned to be bonus material released with Epic Mickey 2, or perhaps on Disney.com to help promote the game. Both of those are things Disney has done many times in the past, and this seems like it could easily be one of those two things. Again, I know this will never happen, but if anyone involved in this short is watching this, I would love to know why this was made and how it was planned to be released. I didn't talk about this in the last video because no one outside of Junction Point even knew it existed until it got leaked, and so I didn't either. Oswald's mini comeback in Japan in the 90s. This one isn't directly related to Epic Mickey, but it is something I didn't know until my commenters told me, and that is that Oswald the Lucky Rabbit had a bit of a mini comeback in Japan in the 1990s. Apparently, a company called Taito acquired the rights to merchandise Oswald and mostly used him as a prize in arcade machines, including in Universal Studios Japan. There is very little information available about the Taito Oswald products, but many of them are available to purchase on sites like eBay, although they tend to be pretty expensive. Look at how adorable they are though. I mean, how can you say no to that face? I've included a link to a blog post about them in the description. Also, I think it's very interesting how many Disney characters have made a comeback in Japan after being forgotten in the US. There's Oswald, there's Duffy the Disney Bear, there's the Orange Bird. I actually have a video about him if you're interested. That's a fascinating story. But Japan seems to be where Disney characters go to have a second chance at life, and I think that's amazing. And that is everything I missed in the last video that I felt like talking about in this one. Part 2. The Return of Epic Mickey. On February 21st, 2024, in Nintendo's Direct Partner Showcase, it was announced that Epic Mickey would be getting a remake titled Epic Mickey Rebrushed, developed by Purple Lamp Studios and published by THQ Nordic, to be released on Nintendo Switch.
Epic Mickey returns in a faithful remake of the beloved classic. Explore this unusual dimension, using the magic brush to shape the world with paint and paint thinner on the path to become an epic hero. Disney Epic Mickey Rebrushed launches on Nintendo Switch this year.
Shortly after, an official website for the game was launched, revealing that the game would also be released on PlayStation, Xbox, and PC. The game's developer, Purple Lamp, was mostly known for the 2020 game SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated, a remake of the 2003 game of almost the same name. It's likely that their experience successfully remaking an older game for modern consoles was a key factor in their being chosen to remake Epic Mickey. Epic Mickey Rebrushed was also announced to not just be a mere remaster of the game, but a full remake built from the ground up with all new assets, with the intention of improving and upgrading the original game in addition to faithfully recreating it. Whereas the original Epic Mickey had been developed in the Gamebryo game engine, Epic Mickey Rebrushed had been developed in the more powerful Unreal Engine. On June 25th, 2024, THQ Nordic shared a new trailer that revealed not only only a collector's edition of Epic Mickey Rebrushed, but also the game's release date, September 24th, 2024. This trailer also featured an appearance by Warren Spector, the creative director of the original Epic Mickey and its sequel, who was involved as a consultant in the creation of Rebrushed.
I'm Warren Spector. I'm the creative director on Disney Epic Mickey, and I was pleased when Disney asked me to work with the talented folks at THQ Nordic and Purple Lamp in remastering the game and bringing it back to a new generation of players. Today, I'm delighted to announce that Disney fans of all ages will be able to join Mickey and Oswald in their daring adventure in Wasteland. The adventure begins September 24th, 2024 for PC and console.
Of his involvement in Epic Mickey Rebrushed, Spector had this to say: "I've received more heartfelt fan mail from players of all ages about Disney Epic Mickey than any other project I've worked on, a true indicator of the timelessness of this game. That my team and I contributed to that legacy is truly an honor, and I'm delighted that old fans and new will get to enjoy the adventures of Mickey and Oswald in Wasteland once again." The collector's edition showcased in this trailer would contain a copy of the game, a steelbook alternate game case, a digital costume pack for the game, a tin sign of art from one of the loading screens from the original Epic Mickey, 6 exclusive postcards featuring artwork from the game, an Oswald Lucky Rabbit keychain, and a 28cm or 11-inch tall plastic statue of Mickey Mouse holding his magic paintbrush and shooting paint from it. Much to the chagrin of many fans of Epic Mickey, the collector's edition was announced to retail for $200 and being limited to only 5,000 available copies. Aside from trailers and press releases, the public's first real look at Epic Mickey Rebrushed would come on August 9th at D23, the Ultimate Disney Fan event, where a demo of Epic Mickey Rebrushed was available on the show floor for attendees to play. And since I was actually there, I think this section of the video deserves its own dedicated part. Part 3. D23, the Ultimate Disney Fan event. D23 is the official Disney fan club. The name stands for Disney in 1923, the year that the Disney Brothers cartoon studio was officially founded, which would eventually become the Walt Disney Company we know today. Every 2 years, D23 holds a giant fan convention at the Anaheim Convention Center called D23 Expo, but this year the event was renamed to D23 the Ultimate Disney Fan Event in honor of the 100th anniversary of Disney. Obviously, as an enormous and lifelong Disney fan, I couldn't miss this. I had to be there. Now, this wasn't my first or even my second D23 event. It was actually my third. I've been a D23 Gold member since 2021, and I had already attended both the previous D23 Expo in 2022, as well as the smaller Destination D23 in 2023. The 2024 event, however, promised to be the biggest and best of all, and also the most stressful. Getting tickets for a D23 event is always a major headache. The demand always far exceeds the capacity of the convention center, and so Disney has responded with higher prices, a lottery system to decide who would even get a chance to buy tickets at all, and 3 separate events to be held at the nearby Honda Center Stadium for the 3 most popular panels. The Entertainment Showcase, where new films are announced, the Experiences Showcase, where new attractions for the theme parks and cruise line are announced, and the Legends Ceremony, where the Disney Legend Award is given out. These 3 events would be ticketed and priced separately from the main convention tickets, although there would be bundles and 3-day passes offered that include all 3 events and all 3 days of the convention, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I'll spare you the details of my excruciating ordeal waiting in the randomized virtual queue and watching in horror as almost everything sold out before I was finally able to get in and secure tickets for myself to attend all 3 days of the convention, plus the Legend Ceremony on Sunday night at the Honda Center, but suffice to say, the whole process took several hours and was not something I'd like to do over, although I'll probably have to when the next D23 event rolls around. Such is life as a Disney fan. Anyway, my presence at the convention was now assured, and I add a couple days at Disneyland to my itinerary as well, since Disneyland is literally right across the street from the convention center, and I'd be damned if I got that close to Disneyland without visiting. Visiting Disneyland is something I try to do every 2 years or so, and so I was due for a visit anyway. But my work preparing for the convention was not over. In fact, it had barely begun. Just as I would be damned if I went to Anaheim without visiting Disneyland, I would be damned if I attended D23 the Ultimate Disney Fan Event without at least putting a little effort into showing off my dedication as a Disney fan. And more than that, I wanted my presence at D23 to be so momentous that Disney themselves would acknowledge it. Too high a goal, perhaps? Well, keep watching. But even at the time, there was precedent for this. Disney's official D23 Instagram account had already posted a picture of me at the last year's Destination D23 event, where I'd worn my Dreamfinder costume, which I've utilized much more on TikTok than I have here on YouTube, and to much more success. If you're unaware, Dreamfinder is kind of a forgotten Disney character himself, except among his extremely, and I mean extremely, devoted fan base. He was the co-star of Epcot's Journey into Imagination, the greatest theme park attraction ever created, and one that was tragically destroyed in the late 90s to ultimately make way for the aggressively mediocre version we have today, Journey into Imagination with Figment, which still features the Dreamfinder's sidekick, the lovable purple dragon Figment. Or at least, it features a totally different and worse version of him from the character who once adventured alongside the Dreamfinder, but that's a story for another video. Dreamfinder is essentially my signature character of the characters I've cosplayed, and so it was a no-brainer that I would portray him at D23 the Ultimate Disney Fan event. However, I knew it was one thing to stand out at an event like Destination D23, which only had a few thousand attendees tops, versus standing out at D23 the Ultimate Disney Fan event, an event that would have tens of thousands of attendees. Now, if any of you are familiar with Disney Dan here on YouTube, great channel by the way, you may know that a few D23 expos ago, he commissioned a puppet builder named Adam Krutinger, who runs a channel called Puppet Nerd, also a great channel by the way, to make him a Figment puppet for his Dreamfinder cosplay. Ever since I had first watched that video, I'd become obsessed with making a Figment puppet for myself. The problem was, I had never made a puppet before, I'd barely even sewn anything before, and the last time I'd even done that was years ago. Virtually all my cosplays were simply a collection of different items and pieces put together into a costume. I'd almost never had to make anything for one myself, but this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and I told myself that if I could learn to make videos on YouTube, to write music, or to do any of the other things I've taught myself to do over my lifetime, then I could learn how to make a puppet. Little did I know exactly what I was getting myself into. I'll skip most of the details and simply give you an overview of the process. First, I printed out pictures of the original Figment animatronic from Journey into Imagination. Next, I used these pictures to make two clay sculptures, one of Figment's entire body, minus his arms and legs, and one bigger, more detailed rendering of just his head. I created these sculptures directly on the paper to make sure they were the exactly correct dimensions, and created them as half sculptures, as if the other half was buried in the paper. This would allow me to mirror the half I created and ensure that both halves of Figment were exactly the same. I then covered the sculptures in drafting tape, removed the tape, and cut it until it lay flat. This was my pattern for the puppet. However, I would have to enlarge this pattern, which wasn't easy. The tutorials I had watched said you could simply send the pattern to a printing company and they would enlarge it for you, but I didn't want to do that. So instead, I devised my own method of enlarging the pattern. First, I measured one straight side of each pattern piece. For each piece that didn't have a straight line, I drew a line of 1 inch on the piece. I then decided that the puppet would need to be 5 times bigger than the pattern. I took pictures of the pattern pieces from directly above of my iPad, and then blew them up on the iPad screen until the side I had measured was exactly 5 times bigger than the physical piece. I then took paper and traced the designs directly off the iPad screen. For pieces that would be bigger than the entire screen, I traced them in sections. I then taped the sections together and traced the paper patterns onto giant foam pieces. I then cut the foam pieces out and glued them together with contact cement. Now I had the skeleton of my Figment puppet. Next, I took purple fabric and pinned it to the foam body upside down. I then cut the excess fabric off, sewed it together, and finally flipped it around and put it back on him so the seams would be on the inside. I did this for the entire foam body and also created arms and legs with the softer foam, as well as details such as fingernails, horns, and a tongue inside his mouth, which also had a plastic mouth plate glued in. However, when I was 90% done with the puppet, I realized that he looked horrible. The fabric I had chosen was too thin, and all the seams showed, making him look more like some Frankenstein's monster and less like the lovable character I had envisioned. I'd already been working on him for several months, but I made the difficult decision to completely scrap everything I'd done except for the foam body and start over. At this point, the D23 event was only a month away. I spent pretty much all of my free time during the month of July racing to get him done, and also to correct the mistakes I had made with the first version. I'll once again spare you the details and tell you that I experimented, worked, and reworked every aspect of him until I felt it was the best I could do. I also had to create a fake arm to make it look like I was holding Figment, as well as cut a hole through my custom Dreamfinder jacket that my real arm would go through to control the puppet, and this also took hours of working and reworking the design until I got it right. Eventually, on August 2nd, a mere 4 days before I was set to leave for California, I finished building my Figment puppet. Here he is. I'm very proud of him, especially since he's the first puppet I've ever made. Huge shout out to Adam Krutinger over at Puppet Nerd, without whose phenomenal tutorial videos I would never have been able to do this. So with Figment now completed, I set off on my journey to D23, the Ultimate Disney Fan event. After I arrived and spent 2 days at Disneyland, it was finally time for the convention to start. After waiting in line for hours in the blazing California sun in 4 layers of clothing, I was finally able to enter the convention center. In the weeks before the convention, attendees have been able to enter a lottery system to get reservations for various events and panels. Otherwise, you'd have to wait in line for them, and only the first people to get in line would get in. I had only gotten 2 reservations of the many I'd asked for. One was a panel for the upcoming continuation of my favorite TV show of all time, Phineas and Ferb, and the other was a panel with the children of the famous Disney songwriting duo, the Sherman Brothers. The Phineas and Ferb panel, unfortunately, was early Friday morning, and I had underestimated how long the lines would be to get into the convention center, and so I was sadly unable to attend that panel. But I didn't have much time to feel sad about that, because as soon as I walked into the main hall of the convention center, I was greeted by the Epic Mickey Rebrushed Pavilion, wherein attendees could play a demo of the upcoming game. I, of course, immediately got in line. Now, the line was actually fairly short as far as how many people were actually standing in it, but the pavilion contained only 5 stations to play the demo, and each player got 10 minutes to do so. So the line moved extremely slowly. It was probably over an hour before I got through it, although I wasn't keeping precise track. While I was standing in line, a man came up to me and asked to take my picture, as several others had also done that morning. After he took my picture, he said he appreciated that my costume was closer to the comic version of Dreamfinder, from the Disney Kingdom's Figment comics if you're unaware, and as he was walking off, a woman who was with him walked up to me and told me that he would be signing copies of a special edition of the Figment comic later that day. I asked her who he was, and she told me that he was Brian Crosby, one of the artists who had worked on the Figment comic series, so that was pretty cool. And just FYI, I actually did not have time to go and get a signed Figment comic later, as the line was closed by the time I got there. Also, while I was waiting in line, I happened to see Warren Spector himself stop by the pavilion. He was talking with a group of people, and I didn't want to get out of line or interrupt him, so I didn't get to meet him. At least, not at this point. Finally, I reached the end of the line. Inside the pavilion was a case containing a copy of the Mickey Mouse statue and Oswald keychain from the collector's edition, as well as a special Xbox Series S console and controller with an Epic Mickey Rebrushed skin that, as of this recording, is currently the prize in an ongoing D23 sweepstakes. There were also 3 stations to play the game on the left side of the pavilion and 2 on the right. The woman working the pavilion asked me if I was familiar with Epic Mickey. Ha ha. She told me the demo would give me 10 minutes to play before directing me to the middle station on the left side, which was the Xbox Series S version, which I assume they all were, but I don't know. The demo started at the point where Mickey learns how to use the brush in Dark Beauty Castle. I skipped all the cutscenes to allow myself more time playing, and attempted to speedrun as far as I could before the time ran out. I ultimately made it as far as the Mickey and the Beanstalk projector level, which I almost finished before the time ran out. As I left the pavilion, the woman asked me if I had enjoyed the demo, and I responded that I had. A man who was also working at the pavilion then handed me an exclusive set of Epic Mickey pins. The set has 4 pins: a pin of Mickey's head against a blue paint splash background, a pin of Oswald's head against a green thinner splash background, a pin of the Magic Paintbrush head against a half blue and half green circular background, and a pin of the Blot's head against a blue circular background. While I like these pins, and I think it's really cool that they gave out a set of 4 instead of the single pin that you usually get from D23 event pavilions, I have to say, I'm a little disappointed by the simplicity and overall blandness of these pins. I received many pins at D23, the Ultimate Disney Fan event, and most of them were better and more visually interesting and appealing than these Epic Mickey Rebrushed pins. And before someone comments to accuse me of complaining about a product I got for free, let me just say that 1, I overall like these pins, I just think they could be better. 2, they weren't really free as I had to pay hundreds of dollars to get into the event in the first place. And 3, these are being resold on sites like eBay for hundreds of dollars, so people obviously consider them to be valuable. So much on the subject of the Epic Mickey Rebrushed exclusive pin set. There was also an Epic Mickey Rebrushed panel on Friday, but as I had not secured a reservation for that and the line was too long, I was unable to attend. Unfortunately, there also doesn't seem to be any footage of the entire event available on YouTube, although there are some clips of parts of it. Throughout the rest of Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, I visited multiple other pavilions, exhibits, and panels, including the Sherman Brothers panel, bought a bunch of merchandise, had my picture taken and my costume complimented by many other attendees, took pictures of and complimented the costumes of many other attendees, attended several cosplay meetups and photo shoots, and in the evening after the convention closed for the day, watched fan live streams on YouTube of the entertainment and experiences showcase at the Honda Center, and attended the Legend ceremony at the Honda Center. I'll talk more about the highlights from Sunday in a moment, but first, please enjoy a short narration-less sequence of some of the things I experienced. Alright, so the most notable thing that happened on Sunday happened as I was walking around the show floor at the convention center. I was approaching the Disney Fine Art Pavilion, right next to the Epic Mickey one, when who should I see before me but none other than Warren Spector. He was standing and talking with a group of people, and I was immediately both starstruck and kind of terrified. I really wanted to say hi to him and tell him how much I loved Epic Mickey, but as an autistic person who also struggles with rejection sensitivity dysphoria, I can also be kind of awkward in in-person interactions, and I also didn't want to interrupt or inconvenience him. I also had been in a similar situation several days earlier that hadn't gone very well. Anxiety doesn't begin to describe how I felt. The truth is, I was terrified. What if he doesn't want to talk to me? What if I have another bad experience? What if this ruins my favorite video game for me? What if I can never play Epic Mickey again without thinking about how Warren Spector didn't want to meet me? What if I'm never able to be happy again and then I die and everyone laughs at me and spits on my grave? I know that all sounds pretty ridiculous, and it is. But welcome to life with rejection sensitivity dysphoria. An amazing thing to have if you're a YouTuber, by the way. But then I thought about the video I'd created about this game and the message I tried to impart with it. Failure and success are concepts that humans made up. Rudyard Kipling called them both imposters. The truth is, reality is largely a subjective experience, and whether something is a success or failure depends entirely on your perception. The only true failure is never trying in the first place, and the only true success is not letting fear stop you from trying. I knew what I had to do. I walked up to Warren Spector, who had finished his conversation and was now looking at the paintings in the Disney Fine Art Gallery, and I said, "Excuse me, are you Warren Spector?" He smiled and said yes, and I introduced myself and told him that Epic Mickey was my favorite video game of all time. He said thank you, and I asked him if it was okay if I took a picture with him, to which he said yes. I took the picture, here it is, thanked him, and then I told him that I was very excited for Rebrushed, and that a lot of fans have been wanting this for a long time. He said he had also really wanted to work on an Epic Mickey remake for a long time, and asked me if I'd played the demo yet. I said yes, and that I had quite enjoyed it. I then decided not to take up any more of his time, and wrapped up the conversation by wishing him well and thanking him again. I didn't mention anything about my YouTube channel or video about Epic Mickey because I didn't want it to seem like I was plugging myself or trying to gain clout or anything like that. I just wanted to tell him how much I loved his game. That evening, I was able to attend the Disney Legends ceremony and see many of the people whose work I love and who I look up to get honored. It was the perfect way to end an amazing weekend. The best part of D23, the Ultimate Disney Fan Event, though, was easily the amazing fans I met and all the incredibly creative costumes I saw, especially the many other Dreamfinder cosplayers. I especially appreciated all the incredibly gracious compliments I received on my own costume and Figment puppet, including from fellow YouTuber Justin Cosplay, who included me in his cosplay music video, and from Disney, who featured me in a post on their official D23 Instagram page, as well as in several videos and group photos that they posted as well. Mission accomplished. Part 4. Epic Mickey returns. On August 27, 2024, THQ Nordic shared a trailer on their YouTube channel in which they announced that an Epic Mickey Rebrushed demo was available for download on all platforms that the game would be released on. The demo allows players to play from the beginning of the game up through the Gremlin Village level based on Fantasyland and It's a Small World, and ends after the elephant door has been opened. I was aware of this demo shortly after it was available, but I never downloaded it. Don't ask why, I don't really have a good answer for that. I guess I just wanted to wait and play the entire game. Finally, on September 24th, 2024, Epic Mickey Rebrushed was released.
In a world ravaged by a mysterious villain and his terrifying goons, the fate of its citizens rests in the hands of one.
Those who had pre-ordered the game were given 24-hour early access, as well as a digital costume pack that was identical to the one included in the collector's edition, and which is currently available for purchase. I, however, did not get a chance to play Epic Mickey Rebrushed until the 27th, 3 days after the release date. Why? Because I, being the insane person that I am, had to have the collector's edition, but I had missed my chance to pre-order it before it immediately sold out. So what did I do? Well, I did something I've done way too many times in my life. I went to eBay, found the cheapest one from a reseller, made sure they had good feedback so I wouldn't get ripped off, selected PayPal as my payment of choice so I could get my money back if they did try to rip me off, bit the bullet, and bought the game. This particular seller was mostly a pleasure to do business with, keeping me updated through regular communication and shipping the game to me the same day they received it. The only thing that wasn't a pleasure was the price, which I will not disclose, but it was a good deal more than the original price despite being the cheapest one available. Now, some of you may be commenting right now and telling me that I have no right to complain about the price if I chose to buy from a reseller, and I disagree. I think consumers have the right to complain about any aspect of a product that isn't up to our standards or expectations. The simple fact is that I wanted this collector's edition, so I bought it, but I didn't like that I had to pay as much as I did in order to get it. Those two things are not contradictory. Also, personally, I disapprove of the practice of reselling. Reselling provides no service to anyone other than the reseller. All it does is increase the cost of a product to the consumer and insert the reseller into the transaction as an unnecessary middleman. It doesn't make the world better. It makes the world worse. However, I can't fully blame resellers for doing what the market incentivizes them to do. Yes, I think the practice is wrong, but if there's money to be made in something, then people are obviously going to do it. The ones ultimately at fault are the companies that choose to artificially limit the supply of something to where it's exceeded by the demand. Disney and THQ Nordic could have easily just made more of this collector's edition, meeting the demand so that everyone who wants one could get one, but instead, they chose to limit the supply to an insanely small number of only 5,000 copies, setting the stage for resellers to buy them up and become the only place anyone can get one. And before you say that I'm wrong and the blame is actually ultimately on consumers for buying from resellers, I just want to say that I think it's very telling when people blame those not in power for societal problems rather than those in power. As a consumer, I don't have the power to control the behavior of other consumers. If I chose not to buy the collector's edition of Epic Mickey Rebrushed, then all that I would have accomplished would be that I wouldn't get to own it. Resellers would still keep reselling to everyone else. My individual actions aren't enough to bring about societal change. What I would have to do is start a social movement against buying from resellers, but I would have to expend an enormous amount of energy to get my message out, to get people to agree with it, and to get them to commit to following it until reselling was no longer profitable. That would be extremely difficult. What would not be difficult at all would be for companies to simply stop releasing limited edition products. That would easily solve the problem immediately. So if the choice is between a person or people in power doing something very easy versus a person or people not in power doing something extremely difficult, why do so many people pretend that the latter option is better than the former, when obviously the opposite is the case? Why do so many people place all the responsibility on those not in power versus those in power? Why is it unreasonable to ask a company to change a business practice, but totally reasonable to ask millions of people to all simultaneously organize? Why? And before you say that this whole section is just me coping about how much I paid for a video game that no one forced me to buy, yes it is. But I'm still right. Anyway, let me show you the collector's edition and what's in it. So this is the Nintendo Switch version of the game, and this is just a cover over the actual box. Here's what it looks like from all four sides. Here's the actual box. Alright, now let's open the box. So this is, of course, the game itself. We'll get to that in a moment. This is the Oswald Lucky Rabbit keychain. It's made of this kind of rubbery plastic. I feel like if I actually use this as a keychain, it's going to break or get scratched really easily, so I'm obviously not going to do that. This is a slip of paper with the digital costume download code on it. These costumes are Steamboat Willie, the Brave Little Tailor, and a football costume from the cartoon Touchdown Mickey. I find it really weird that two of these costumes are from iconic Mickey cartoons, and one isn't. Instead of Football Mickey, they could have done so many great ones. Mickey's Birthday Party, the Sorcerer's Apprentice from Fantasia, which actually was a costume in Epic Mickey 2, the band concert, Magician Mickey, Lonesome Ghosts, the Nifty 90s, there's a great costume. There were so many options to choose from. I don't get why they chose this one, but whatever. This is a paper sleeve for the postcards or art pieces, and it just says Disney Epic Mickey Rebrushed and THQ Nordic. The trailer calls these postcards, but they're really not. They're too big to be postcards, and they have nowhere to write a message or anything, which I don't care about one bit because I would obviously never use these as postcards. They are too awesome. This This one is the Coliseum in the world of Gremlins. This one is the Gag Factory and Oswald statue in Oztown. This one is Mickey Junk Mountain. This one is Lonesome Manor. This one is the world of Gremlins. And this one is also the world of Gremlins. And here's what they all look like from the back. I do love these, but I really wish they showed off a more diverse range of locations. I would love one of Dark Beauty Castle, and I want one of the Blot, but these are still pretty cool. Next we have the Steelbook, which I'm guessing is probably aluminum, and the hinge is just bendy plastic, which strikes me as lazy, but here's what it looks like. So now if we remove this top piece, and I have to remove it carefully because there's nothing holding these art pieces in, we can see what else is in here. This is the tin sign. It comes in a paper sleeve similar to the one for the art pieces, and under that is a clear plastic sleeve. Of course, the design is of Mickey from the loading screen of Epic Mickey, and it says Disney Epic Mickey Rebrushed. And then it's just plain on the back, obviously. And finally, we have the pièce de résistance, the Mickey Mouse statue. It comes in its own box, and here's what that looks like. Okay, now opening it, the statue comes packaged in two clear plastic pieces. Let me take those off. Okay, so the statue itself is also in two pieces. This piece, which is the head of the brush and the paint coming out of it, just goes on here like this, and then just fits into place. And this will not flop over. It's mostly round, but there's a small flat section at the base of the brush that keeps this piece in place correctly. And then here's the statue from all sides. And that's everything in the Epic Mickey Rebrushed Collector's Edition. So just for fun, I'm going to compare the original Epic Mickey Collector's Edition to the Rebrushed one. The original Collector's Edition is much smaller and only contains a few things. It has the game, of course. It has a DVD of behind-the-scenes material about the making of the game, which is for some reason just in a cardboard sleeve. Extremely lazy in my opinion. Taking the disc in and out of this repeatedly could scratch it, although the cardboard is kind of convex, so it really only touches the sides of the disc. Either way, they should have put this disc in a proper plastic case. Otherwise, the Collector's Edition includes skins for the Wii and Wii Remote, which look like this, and then of course the Mickey Mouse statue, which looks like this. So overall, the Rebrushed one certainly seems better. I mean, it has way more stuff in it, the statue is bigger, and overall it feels more substantial than the original, which barely has anything in it. However, nothing in the Rebrushed Collector's Edition is as good as the bonus DVD in the original. Not even close. This is a real treasure if you're a fan of this game, and by the way, everything on this disc is available to watch here on YouTube, and I'll link to that in the description. So, I actually think the original Collector's Edition is better because of this one item, and I would have been thrilled if they had included a behind-the-scenes documentary for Rebrushed, but they didn't. So unfortunately, this new Collector's Edition just can't compete with the old one. It is great though. Alright, now let's finally get to what you almost certainly clicked on this video for. Let's talk about Epic Mickey Rebrushed. Part 5. Epic Mickey Rebrushed. Epic Mickey Rebrushed is not simply a remaster of Epic Mickey. It's a full remake from the ground up. As such, while it is essentially the same experience as playing Epic Mickey, there are many differences between the two games. The most obvious one that players of the original game will notice immediately is the change in the visuals. Epic Mickey Rebrushed somehow simultaneously looks exactly the same and completely different from Epic Mickey, in the best possible way. Obviously, Rebrushed has a much sharper resolution and higher frame rate than the original, but the visual updates go far beyond this. While the levels are for the most part direct recreations of the levels from the original game, they have more detailed textures, slightly different visual designs, and sometimes entirely new things have been added. One of my favorite visuals from the original Epic Mickey was the view of Dark Beauty Castle from Mean Street. This is what it looks like in Epic Mickey, and this is what it looks like in Rebrushed. As you can see, a lot has been changed. The projector screens in the original just have small archways around them, and in Rebrushed, they have entire buildings. The sky is much more purple and starry in Rebrushed, as opposed to the blue and stormy sky in the original, and the Walt Disney and Oswald statue in Rebrushed has much more visible vines growing around it than the vaguely unfinished statue from the original. The entire game is like this, with the visuals being essentially the same, but completely redone. One of my favorite examples is from the final level inside the Blot, where in the original game the level is this creepy purple and green horrorscape of paint and thinner. Rebrushed upgrades it by adding all the buildings and characters the Blot has devoured, which adds so much to this already amazing area. The characters technically were there in the original, but they seem to be much more present in Rebrushed, and the buildings are completely new. And it makes this area so much better than it even already was. So, do I think the visuals in Rebrushed are better overall than in Epic Mickey? Well, at first I thought yes, because I was honestly that blown away by how good Rebrushed looks, and it looks really good. But going back and comparing the two games side by side, I noticed that there is an element of creepiness the original has that the remake doesn't fully capture. Going back to the visual of Dark Beauty Castle, the swirling storm in the sky in the original feels menacing and ominous, whereas the starry sky in Rebrushed feels more mysterious and less foreboding. It's a subtle difference, but I would say it holds true throughout the entire game. Because the creepiness and sinister edge of the first game is such an essential part of why it works, and because Rebrushed doesn't fully capture it, although I would say it mostly does, it's hard for me to say that the visuals of Rebrushed Rebrushed are across the board better than those of Epic Mickey. I'm also not considering the resolution or frame rates in that comparison because that's just not fair. By the standards of their platforms when they were made, both have amazing visuals in slightly different ways, and I appreciate that Rebrushed took the time to give us something new that still mostly captures what made the original great. On their own, the visuals of Rebrushed are phenomenal. Compared to the original, they add something and they lose something. The other obvious difference is of course the control scheme. A Wii Remote and Nunchuck are very different from a standard game controller. This was something that of course Purple Lamp had no control over, pun intended, but I still think it's totally fair to compare and contrast which type of control scheme is better suited to this game. Epic Mickey of course utilized the Wii's motion controls for the magic paintbrush, having the player point the remote at the screen to control the brush. I always liked this control scheme as I felt it perfectly approximated how Mickey held the brush. In Rebrushed, the brush is controlled by the right joystick, which also controls the camera, which I'll talk about in a moment. The reticle of the brush always stays in the center of the screen, and so instead of controlling the brush itself, you're actually just controlling the camera, with the brush simply always pointing in the center. This makes Rebrushed much more like a third-person shooter. As with the visuals, I think something is gained and lost here. The brush is, for the most part, much easier to control here, and especially to keep pointing in the same place. If you have unsteady hands, then keeping the Wii Remote pointed at the exact spot for an extended amount of time can be difficult. That obviously isn't a problem here. However, there was a lot more freedom with the Wii Remote to point the brush in multiple directions regardless of the camera, and that's just impossible to do in Rebrushed, which can lead to some awkward situations. There are also a few sections of the game, mostly boss battles, where the camera will lock in place and the right joystick will control the paintbrush reticle. I found these sections very annoying for two reasons. One, while in theory the ability to independently control the reticle should be great, the controls aren't very precise. One small move of the joystick causes the reticle to move further than it feels like it should, which can make it difficult to hold it in one position, especially when you're moving around to dodge attacks. Two, the locked camera is annoying on its own for what should be obvious reasons. It's a 3D environment. I need to be able to move the camera around, and the inability to do so is frustrating. The last thing about the controls I want to mention is the addition of 3 new moves: sprinting, dashing, and ground pounding. These are fine and cool additions, but they're really never necessary, and they don't really make anything easier either. Sprinting isn't really fast enough to make much of a difference in how quickly you complete a level. Ground pounding is essentially the same as the spin move, but with the added step of jumping, so it's just never necessary. And dashing can help you dodge attacks sometimes, but it's really not much better in most cases than just walking out of the way. I will say though that dashing is easily the most useful of the 3 new moves, but there's really no competition. So despite their overall insignificance, the presence of these new moves takes nothing away from the game and does give players more options, so it is still a positive thing. Now let's talk about the camera. The camera in Epic Mickey Rebrushed is massively better than the camera in Epic Mickey, and it completely comes down to the controls. If you ask me how often you have to correct the camera in Rebrushed versus the original, I would say that question makes no sense. You know why? Because Rebrushed lets you control the camera. When you're playing Rebrushed, just like with a first or third person shooter, your thumb is always on that right joystick. You're always controlling the camera. It doesn't matter if the game's automatic camera controls can keep up with you or not, because you're controlling the camera. This by itself solves 90% of Epic Mickey's camera problems. Now, there are still the sections I mentioned earlier where the camera locks in place, and that's annoying, but there are not nearly as many sections in Rebrushed that do this as there were in the original game. Also, there are a few sections, usually a tight corner, where the camera will inexplicably zoom in extremely close on Mickey, which was a problem in the original game and is still a problem in Rebrushed. But far and away, I just did not experience the kind of annoying and frustrating camera problems I did in the original while playing Rebrushed. This is one area where I can confidently say that Rebrushed is a huge upgrade to Epic Mickey. Another really great change to Rebrushed is that when you leave a map, it saves all your changes you've made of paint and thinner. So now, unlike the original game, which resets everything when you leave, this time, you can actually design things the way you want and have them stay that way. The choice and consequence mechanic is otherwise pretty much unchanged from the original. This was one really simple thing they needed to change, and I'm very glad that they did. Some other changes to Rebrushed are the inclusion of far more collectibles, which is awesome, a cinema where you can replay projector levels, and more areas in the levels to explore. I'm not going to go into detail about these, as there are other people on this platform who have already done so much better than I could. I will say though that I consider all of these to be upgrades over the original game. The last change I want to discuss is the cutscenes, which were completely reanimated from the original cutscenes, just like with the rest of the game. However, unlike the rest of the game, where the visuals add something but also lose something, here, they're just unequivocally better. In fact, it's not even close. These new cutscenes have far better lighting, far better detail and texture, and just overall looks stunning. Also, the addition of subtitles is another win, making the game more accessible for everyone. So overall, I am extremely pleased and impressed with Epic Mickey Rebrushed. It's pretty much everything I wanted out of an Epic Mickey remake. This could have easily been a simple case of porting the game one-to-one to modern consoles and keeping it the exact same in every way, which for the record, I would have been totally fine with. But the fact the creators chose to put in the effort to completely rebuild and redesign this game from scratch shows just how much they care about it and how much they wanted this game to be something new that would bring in new fans. Not just an opportunity for fans of the original to play that game on a newer console. And as such, this game does really feel like a new experience, a new version of something familiar. Like all great remakes, it stands on its own from the original. It's its own thing. So, is Epic Mickey Rebrushed better than Epic Mickey? Well, that depends on what you mean. If you mean as a work of art and storytelling, no. Rebrushed owes its greatness to the original game. Epic Mickey is a stunningly original creative work that explores Disney's history and characters with surprising depth and heart, and Rebrushed is a phenomenal remake of that work, but it doesn't have a creative voice of its own. It's merely attempting to recreate someone else's. So no, I don't think Rebrushed is as good as the original Epic Mickey from that perspective. If I were ranking the greatest Disney video games of all time, for instance, it would make no sense to include Rebrushed on that list instead of the original game. However, if you ask me which is a better gaming experience, I would say Rebrushed easily. In general, it looks better, it feels better to play, and it's just overall a more polished experience. It feels like a modern game, not an old game on a modern console. So for the vast majority of players and in the vast majority of ways that matter to them, Rebrushed is going to be the better game. And whether you're an old fan of Epic Mickey like me, or a new fan just learning about the franchise, I would highly recommend you pick up Rebrushed and play it. I love this game, and I would love to see it be a big hit. Part 6. The future of Epic Mickey. So where, if anywhere, will the Epic Mickey franchise go from here? Well, I don't know for certain, I can't see the future, but I'm not going to let that stop me from trying. So here are my predictions of some of the things I think could happen, and what I would personally like to happen. The first thing that could happen is, of course, nothing. It's very possible that Rebrushed could simply be a one-off. This is likely if the game either doesn't sell very well or is only a moderate success. However, if the game is a big enough financial success, I think we could see a remake of Epic Mickey 2 The Power of Two, and honestly, I would be thrilled if that happened. As you may know if you saw my last video about Epic Mickey, I was pretty disappointed by Epic Mickey 2, and I don't think it's a good game, but I would still love to see it get a remake, and that's for two reasons. One, because this would be an opportunity to fix some of that game's problems, and two, because it would mean we could potentially get an Epic Mickey 3. Now here's where we get into what I want to happen with Epic Mickey. I want the franchise to be an actually successful video game franchise, not a franchise consisting of a cult classic game, a sequel that no one liked, and some other random stuff that no one outside the fanbase even remembers. Epic Mickey deserves so much better than that. Mickey Mouse is one of, if not the most recognizable fictional characters on the planet, and Epic Mickey is one of his deepest and best stories. And the franchise has so much potential to be something truly amazing and once in a generation, and that potential has never been fully realized, but it can be. So what would I like to see in an Epic Mickey 3 if that somehow ever happens? Well, I don't care what characters it features, I don't care what locations it goes to, and I don't care who the villain is, or how many classic Disney references it contains that only someone as insanely Disney obsessed as me would recognize. What I care about, and what I want to see in an Epic Mickey 3, is a story that truly cares about Mickey and Oswald as characters, and that lets its players explore what we think about Mickey and Oswald as characters. Is Mickey better and more interesting as a selfless hero, or a mischievous anti-hero? Is Oswald a jealous has-been, or the rightful mascot of Disney? I want a game that lets us answer those questions, and in so doing makes us examine ourselves and what we believe. How important is family to us? Are we worthy of love and redemption? When faced with threats to our world, and to our identities, what do we do in response? What do we believe is worth saving? What do we believe is worth sacrificing? That's what I want to see from an Epic Mickey 3, if it ever happens. Which, you know, it probably won't, but Disney, if you're watching this, give me a call. Seriously though, do I think an Epic Mickey 3 could ever get made? Probably not, but who knows? And for right now, who cares? Epic Mickey is back. It's back in the public consciousness. It's bringing in new fans, and it's bringing back old fans. None of us thought this could ever happen, but it did. So anything's possible, and I choose to be optimistic. We'll just have to wait and see what happens. Part 7. My Epic Mickey Story. In 2023, Warren Spector wrote a series of posts on his blog, Gaming the System, about what he believes are the keys to success in game design. I'm going to read several excerpts from these posts. If you really want to make a statement, to tell players something you think is important and what you think or feel about it, don't make a game. Write a novel or make a movie. Here's my main argument. Games shouldn't make statements. They can, and should, ask players to ponder questions. In a novel or movie, the author, however you define author, really does make statements. They answer questions related to a theme or issue. All you can do as a reader or viewer, or listener or whatever, is interpret. You get to agree or disagree. In a game, you answer those questions for yourself every step you take in our virtual worlds. Disney Epic Mickey asked a few questions too. Frankly, it pains me that a lot of players didn't see how similar in intent and philosophy Epic Mickey was to the other games I've worked on, but that's another story. Anyway, Epic Mickey asked a completely different set of questions than Deus Ex. 1. How important are family and friends to you? 2. Is it better to be less powerful, but have friends who will help you do what you need to do, or is it better to be more individually powerful, but alone in the world? 3. Is it better to do the easy thing to solve a local problem, like getting someone's cat out of a tree, when the fate of the entire world is in your hands, or is it better to ignore local problems because you do have an entire world to save? 4. What happens when you remain rooted in the past, versus being willing to forgive past grievances and move on? 5. What does it mean to be forgotten? How does that make you feel? How does that affect who you are? Diving a little deeper into that idea, we offer the related joy of personal expression in authorship. Until the coming of games, media were exclusively one way. Only the author, or director or composer or painter, got to express their views about whatever subject they chose. Only the author got to tell their story and tell you what they thought about what went on in it. The user could only interpret, a term I prefer to interact, what was fed to them. In games, we can all express ourselves through play, in other words, through the exercise of our creative muscles. We can all be the author of our own unique experience. I tell my teams that if two players describe an in-game event or mission the same way, we've failed. Every player or storyteller is a pretty good thing to shoot for, I think. In games, that is best expressed when we give players the in-game opportunity to do things that no one in the world has tried or seen before. When we give them tools, an environment, and a set of variables they can manipulate as they wish. The second joy we offer players is the opportunity to explore their personal belief systems, not the developer's belief system, or worse, a character's belief system. When we offer players the opportunity to answer the questions we ask, we're not asking them to tell us what we think or what their character, their avatar, thinks. We're asking them to ponder what they think, as people in the real world. Games can be about the human on the other side of the screen, the people with their hands on a controller or mouse and keyboard. I have a lot of respect for Warren Spector, and I think he's a really smart and very nice guy who I definitely consider to be an expert in video game design and creation. At the same time, I disagree with some of the things he says here. First of all, I don't think he really understands Epic Mickey. I know that may seem insane for me to say, seeing as he was the creative director of Epic Mickey, but hear me out. Does Epic Mickey really ask the questions Spector says it does? Well, no. For example, Epic Mickey never asks what happens when you remain rooted in the past versus being willing to forgive past grievances and move on. That just never happens in the game. There's only one ending, one where forgiveness happens and characters move on. The game doesn't give you the option to stay rooted in the past, and thus only allows the player to answer this question one way. The game isn't asking a question, it's making a statement, the exact thing Warren Spector says not to do in games. Epic Mickey, at the end of the day, isn't really an immersive sim where the player gets to answer the questions posed by the game. It simply doesn't allow enough player agency for this, and the player agency it does allow has no effect on the unfolding of the overall story. It's really a linear story like a movie or novel, with characters who develop and change and learn and grow, regardless of the decisions made by the player. No matter what you do in Epic Mickey, Oswald and Mickey will become friends, Wasteland will be saved, and both characters will find forgiveness. Epic Mickey is not asking you how important family is to you, as Spector claims it is. If it was, it would have a possible ending where Mickey and Oswald don't become family. It would give the player the choice, but it doesn't. It only has the one ending. It's making a statement that family is important. Warren Spector fundamentally misunderstands his own game. Now, do I believe his intention was for Epic Mickey to ask these questions and be an immersive sim like Deus Ex, where players get to make their own statements through their play choices? Yes, I absolutely believe that that was his intention, but the actual game he and his team created clearly isn't that. He can say all day what his intention was, but if it doesn't manifest in the creative work itself, then it really doesn't matter. Epic Mickey is an amazing game, but it isn't the game Warren Spector thinks it is. Second of all, I think Warren Spector is dead wrong about other non-video game media being, quote, one way, and only being capable of making statements and not asking questions. This is an absolutely insane claim to me, especially as an avid reader and aspiring filmmaker. Movies and books obviously don't simply make statements that audiences can agree or disagree with, as Spector claims. They do ask questions, and they do invite the audience to ponder their own beliefs and opinions. One recent example of this is the brilliant film American Fiction, which I could talk about for hours, but suffice to say, it leaves its audience with no clear message, rather inviting them to think about their own biases and beliefs about the subject matter presented. It doesn't tell you how to think, it asks you what you think. something Spector apparently thinks movies are incapable of. A linear story absolutely can and should ask questions and not just make statements. It should allow and enable its audience to tell their own story. Not literally, as in a game, but through the way we interact with the media and through the effect it has on our lives. Stories we love become our stories. Even if we're not the author of the story, we can adopt the story and contextualize it into our own lives. Stories can inform how we view the world. They can tell us things about ourselves and about others. They can affirm who we are as human beings. They can become part of our story. And despite the fact that Epic Mickey does not enable players to tell their own stories in the way that Warren Spector intended, it has enabled players to tell their stories. In fact, the comment section in my last video is full of them. So many of the comments under that video are people telling their stories about why they love Epic Mickey and the effect it had on their lives. And every story is amazing. But one is missing, and that's my Epic Mickey story. If you watched my last video, you may be wondering why I had my friend Atlas Genesis tell his Epic Mickey story instead of simply telling my own. And the answer is that I don't really have one. Epic Mickey, despite being my favorite video game, didn't really have a big impact on me. It didn't make me a Disney or animation fan. I'd already been one for years. In fact, that's why I was interested in the game in the first place. It didn't really inform my taste in video games or expand my palette for them. There were other games I've played that were way more important in doing that. The themes of the story also weren't really applicable to my life at the time. I didn't really strongly relate to any of the characters at that point in my life. I don't even have any interesting stories about how I learned about the game or any specific fond memories associated with it. It's essentially just a game that I love that has an amazing story of its own, but was never really part of my story. Well, until now, of course. Epic Mickey could have easily become a forgotten game itself, banished to its own wasteland. But thanks to a dedicated community of passionate fans, it lives on. Oswald and Mickey have come a long way since they drove that trolley and steamboat in the late 1920s, and I believe they still have a bright future ahead of them. Warren Spector may not have fully succeeded when he set out to let players tell their own stories in Epic Mickey, but in a way, he did. More than even he could have imagined. Epic Mickey is our story now, and I think that might just be the most epic part of all.
Coming soon.
In 1933, Walt Disney was riding high off a string of successive successes in the animation industry. These successes included, in 1923, putting a live actor in a cartoon with the Alice comedies. In 1927, raising the bar for animated storytelling with Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. In 1928, creating one of the first and by far the most innovative sound cartoons with Steamboat Willie. In 1929, dominating cinemas and merchandise around the world with Mickey Mouse. In 1932, creating the first full-color cartoon, Flowers and Trees. And in 1933, creating what's still the most successful cartoon of all time, Three Little Pigs. The Disney studio was cranking out one innovation after another, and Walt Disney had no plans to stop. In fact, quite the opposite. Walt was dreaming up his most ambitious idea yet, one that would combine all of the previous innovations to create something even bigger and better than he and his team had ever created before. Something so spectacular and revolutionary that it would change filmmaking forever. Well, Figment, what do you think?
I think I want to play Epic Mickey Rebrushed again.
You know what, Figment? I think I do too. I may not agree with Warren Spector on everything, but he sure made a great game, didn't he?
He sure did.
Alright everyone, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you'd like to support this channel, you can do so by joining my Patreon, which is linked in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and remember that you're extraordinary. I love all of you so much, and I'll see you all again real soon. Bye. Say goodbye, Figment.
Goodbye, Figment.